Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Client Risk Solutions. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers with VFIS Client Risk Solutions, and today we're discussing the use of whole blood in emergency services. Joining me on the program today are Jordan Natoli and Dr. Paul Cowan from the Sussex County Department of Public Safety in Sussex County, Delaware. Jordan is the field training coordinator, and Dr. Cowan is the medical director for the organization. They are joining the program today to discuss their department's whole blood program, how it was developed, and how they deploy it in the field. Jordan, Dr. Cowan, it's great to have you both on the program today, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for offering the ability to join you.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. So before we get started into the details of the whole blood program, can you tell us a little bit about Sussex County paramedics, a little bit about the organization size and where you service and things like that?
Sure. So Sussex County EMS is, we're obviously in Delaware. We're in Sussex County, Delaware. Delaware is a pretty small state, but we're growing rapidly. Sussex County is one of the three counties in the state. We're the southernmost county. We're the largest county. And I would tell you perhaps we're the most rural county, although we are one of the most rapidly growing areas in the Mid-Atlantic. Our year-round population is around 250,000 people, give or take. But in the summertime, because of all of our beaches and tourism, we can swell to, just about 1 million people.
Jordan, how many square miles are we?
I think we're just under 1,000. I think our total square mileage is around 1,100, but a lot of that, or a couple hundred miles of that, is incorporated into bodies of water. So, we have obviously the Atlantic Ocean. We have a lot of inland waterways, bays. So we cover a huge territory. Sussex County EMS is unique. All of Delaware is really unique. We are a county-based, entirely tax-funded. We don't bill. Chase car, all ALS system. A bit of the irony here is we don't even own an ambulance other than our simulated ambulance in our training center. We're CAS accredited. We are accredited with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. And I believe at the time we did that, we were the only EMS agency in the world to achieve both of those accreditations. We cover about 32,000 ALS calls a year. We have a tiered staffing model where we support 21 basic life support fire companies. They're a combination of volunteer fire companies that have paid staffing. They're all basic life support. And we respond through an EMD model where we only respond to Charlie Delta Echo calls, so only calls, triages, ALS, or unless otherwise sort of requested for intercept. We are a county that has, and I think it's important as we begin to talk about whole blood, we have no direct access to a level 1 trauma center. Our level 1 trauma centers are all a fairly significant distance away. To get people to level 1 trauma centers, we use aviation through the Delaware State Police, or the Maryland State Police occasionally comes in and helps us out, or one of the few private companies that provide interfacility coverage. So we're about at the furthest end of our county, 90 nautical miles from a level 1 trauma center. We don't have any direct access even to a level 2 trauma center. So all of our receiving hospitals are level 3 community hospitals here in Sussex County. So that was a huge driver for us to look at whole blood.
And so you mentioned that you all don't have any ambulances. Did I hear you correct?
Yeah, we don't own an ambulance. We are an entire chase service model. We upgrade the BLS fire companies that respond in their ambulance. And, we have a unique system in that in Delaware, the legislature, the law is that 2 paramedics have to respond to every ALS incident. We operate traditionally, most of our units are 2 paramedics in a Suburban, 2 sets of gear, but oftentimes because of our volume and how busy we've become, it's 2 paramedics responding in 2 different Suburbans from different areas. And then we carry everything that we need onto the ambulance. The BLS fire companies have absolutely no ALS equipment. So Everything that we need, we bring with us, and then we'll transport to the hospital, and then at some point rendezvous back with our partner or to our truck.
That is a very unique arrangement. I live in Texas, and there might be a organization that is structured like that, but I haven't came across it. So it's interesting to learn that there's all kinds of models that work for everyone across the country.
Yeah. So one of the catchphrases in EMS is that if you've seen one EMS service, you've only seen one EMS service.
Right.
You know, they because if you look at the history of EMS in this country, they all organically grew differently. You know, some of them literally came out of funeral homes, some of them out of hospitals. Um, so it all kind of depends on sort of how you grow. The system here in Delaware is, although unique, is consistent from the top to the bottom of the state. So our paramedic protocols are defined at the state level, and the other two counties operate very similar to the way we do.
Well, so it sounds like that you all have become an extension of the hospital as a rolling ER with the amount of things that you're added to, and then the level of trauma centers that you have at your disposal. It seems like that you all are almost a roving ER out there.
So I think when you look at what a paramedic does, when I describe that, you know, I'm full-time emergency medicine physician. I describe the treatments that a paramedic does as really the first 10 or 15 minutes of what you would need to get if you rolled into the front door of an emergency department. So with regards to trauma, whole blood is certainly part of that. Um, Sussex County EMS has a long-standing history of sort of pushing the envelope of treatment modalities. We were an early adopter of 12 lead EKGs 25 years ago. That predates me here. We're an early adopter of end-tidal CO2. We're an early adopter of rapid sequence intubation. So this is an extension of sort of what we do when we look to see what we can provide to patients in an appropriate, timely fashion.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you all are a very progressive agency. And so to kind of dovetail to that, what prompted Sussex County to explore and implement their whole blood program?
Well, let's talk just for a minute about what whole blood is. So, when you are in a hospital and you need quote unquote blood, what you typically get is something called packed red cells. So to go back farther, when you donate blood, you give the blood center a unit of your blood, and then they do what's called fractionation, where they spin it down into the different parts, and they give you just the part that you need. That is a 101 version of blood transfusion. Um, it's been around for the last 30 years or so. What we in healthcare understood, unfortunately, coming out of military, which is where all of our trauma care comes from, is that people do better if you give them the entire unit of blood as opposed to trying to give them a fractionated portion of the blood. And they also do better if you give them blood than if you give them any other fluid, in this case, normal saline or lactated ringers. So we understood that here. And one of our challenges with the trauma centers being so far away is we ask our paramedics to make a very difficult question or a difficult decision. Is this person stable enough to survive a 30 or 40-minute flight to a level 1 trauma center? Or are they so badly injured that they need to go to a local facility for immediate resuscitation? And that's a really, really hard decision to make very quickly in the blink of an eye in the middle of the night when it's raining. So whole blood makes it much easier for us, where we know that if someone has significant internal bleeding, we can give them a unit of whole blood and they can be stabilized for the flight to a level 1 center.
So it buys you some time. It buys you some time that you didn't have before this program.
Without a doubt.
It is, I think we'll probably end up with some success stories here, but it's actually quite remarkable what it does. Whole blood is probably a game changer that is going to change sort of the face of trauma care and EMS in the country. But how do we get to it? I think all that Dr. Cowan has said is really cool and certainly meaningful, but I honestly think we were looking for the next cutting edge thing to do. We were trying to be a little avant-garde. We were trying to suggest, hey, look, what else is out there that we could push the envelope for? And the benefit to being in a small state where I can call my colleagues in either of the other counties, or, we're on a first name sort of relationship with the state EMS medical director, or even medical directors in the adjacent counties. We just started talking about it. I honestly think it came up as sort of a, like a jab or a joke. Hey, what are we going to do next? Whole blood? And I think Dr. Cowan and I sort of took that to heart and thought, well, yeah, let's do it. Why can't we do it? Absolutely, we're going to do it. And, at the time, you have to remember this conversation probably started 4 years ago. There were maybe 1 or 2% of the EMS agencies in the country's doing this. And quite honestly, I knew nothing about it. I thought it would be as easy as, hey, go into the blood bank. We're going to buy blood from you. We're going to put it in a cooler and we're going to give it to people that need it. And I quickly, and Dr. Cowan quickly realized that, that's not how it works. A few months ago, I went and, at the request of our local blood bank, spoke to a conference for the American Blood Centers. And I was joking with, all of these representatives and executives from blood centers around the country that I was so ignorant to this process. And I sort of said, you guys are very serious about this blood thing. I thought we were just going to come to your door and grab a unit of blood and put it in a red igloo cooler and slap a medical logo on it and just, drive the cool calls really fast and give it to people that need it. And certainly I was joking, but, we knew it would make a difference. We initially didn't know how much of a difference it would make here. And I think we thought it would be an easier process, quite honestly.
So it's funny, Jordan was a little surprised. Jordan actually has a background as a critical care nurse in addition to being a paramedic. I understood working in a hospital that the blood bank in a hospital is, I equivalent or describe it as similar to the Nuclear Regulatory Agency. I mean,
Sure.
It is the degree to which blood is regulated in the hospital is unbelievable and appropriate. I mean, it is, but it's no surprise. And it's no surprise that when we first went to our local blood vendor and said, we want to give blood, they were like, they couldn't even imagine what we do for a living. And they couldn't imagine that we could do it with the precision of which they required from a safety standpoint. And that really was, thank God they worked closely with us, because that's what took us the longest time, is to demonstrate how we could safely carry it and safely deploy it in the field while keeping all of the same safety steps that they require inside a hospital. That required a lot of expansion of the minds on both the blood bank and of us about how they require stuff. And that took a long time being more than a year, probably 18 months, you think?
Probably about 2 years. Yeah, it was definitely a game of, 2 steps forward and 5 steps backward. Because, blood is one of the only things that I know of, and I didn't know this before this, but it's regulated by multiple federal bodies. I mean, they consider blood both a biologic and a drug. So you can imagine that the FDA becomes involved, and there's so many regulatory guidelines to jump through. But by the way, I mentioned this jokingly, but the blood bankers, this is their thing. They're very passionate about making sure they meet all of these regulatory guidelines, and to give it to guys in a cool uniform with lots of cool fun things that drive around with lights and sirens was a foreign concept when we had first started this process.
So I think the good news, Chris, for anybody who's listening right now, is I hope we don't scare you from trying to implement this, because we looked at early adopters. We, in particular, San Antonio. What's the phrase you use? Rip and repeat.
Yeah, I called it. When we were doing this, there was no guidebook, so I would say we did a lot of R&D, which was rip off and duplication. So I relied on just cold calling these places and saying, hey, look, we want to do this. We see you do it. Help us work through the process. And you sort of come up with this, MacGyvered system tailored to your system. And, the good news is now that Now that there's a lot more evidence out there, if there was not great evidence at the time, the American Association of Blood Bankers have come up with some guidelines. I think it will be a lot easier now for people listening to this that want to venture down this path. And quite honestly, if we can just talk about the business side of this, it's great marketing and great business for both your EMS agency and the blood bank. Everybody loves first responders. Everybody loves feel-good stories. Our blood bank reps would tell you that they capitalize on this as much as possible. Trauma centers love that you bring them people that are critically injured but yet alive, because it becomes an opportunity to treat somebody and bill somebody. So there is a lot of positive business aspects to this, in addition to all of the profound clinical applications it has.
And I'm sure it probably gives your providers some just makes them feel better, because there might have been situations before that when y'all didn't have this program that patient might not have made it. Where and we'll get to it in a little bit about some of the success stories where now that you have this program that patient was able to pull through and survive that incident. Right. So it's probably a big morale builder for the crews, I would think.
Without a doubt. Certainly there's some learning curve, and there was some apprehension initially. It's a new therapeutic modality. Do I give it to the right person? All that kind of stuff. But without a doubt, and once there is no question that there are people that are alive today because of this program that would not be alive otherwise. And think about how profound that is. Again, when I think about all the things that I've seen in emergency medicine and in pre-hospital medicine over the years, and I've been doing this now for more than 25 years, this is probably the single most transformative thing that we've done. And that's in the setting of 12 lead EKGs and rapid sequence intubation and end-tidal CO2 and pacing people. CPAP. I mean, all of these things that we've done that we were really proud of ourselves, thinking that we were reducing mortality, and we really were. This is by far the most transformative. I think one of the great comments that I heard was, when you give somebody whole blood, it's almost like reanimation. So if you remember Woody from Toy Story, where Woody's laying on the floor of the bedroom when the kid is in the room, and as soon as the kid closes the door, Woody comes to life. That's sort of what we see with these people that are profoundly hypotensive from traumatic injuries, where you give them exactly what they've lost, and they have a significant improvement in their mentation, significant improvement in their vital signs. I mean, they
wake up.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Right. For sure.
They wake up. I think it's important for other people listening to this too, is, we sort of danced around the regulatory guidelines and all of the extra work that it creates. I don't think, as an employer, any employer wants to create extra tasks or burdens onto their workforce, thinking that they're going to complain about it. And, oh my gosh, you want me to do this with this cooler and check and audit and respond to these extra calls and do these extra things and have these additional sort of responsibilities and tasks. And what I would tell you is that, sure, that probably happens in a lot of EMS systems. You do a new protocol, or you do a new thing, and people sort of complain about it. That did not happen here. You want to talk about a group of people that was motivated to get to calls. I mean, I would joke with the supervisors, are your brakes on fire? How fast did you drive to get blood to that person? And you're talking, each one of our field supervisors, we deploy 2 units of whole blood. So remember, we're a big rural county. They're covering about 500 or 600 square miles, each one of them. So the ability to get blood to the bedside is challenging, and they're getting it there, and they're doing it with pride, and they're doing it with this eagerness that is really, really cool.
We not infrequently will have both supervisors will make it to a scene, which is pretty amazing, because one of those supervisors is coming from a long way away, but they've got that second unit of blood and they understand how important it is.
So where do you all get you've mentioned the blood bank? Is that a single source where you get the blood, or can you get it from the hospital blood bank? What's the process?
So this is a point where whoever's listening to this has to look at their own system. And this is one of those things that's uniquely different everywhere. Lots of systems are able to source their blood from a hospital. In this case, we source our blood from the blood bank of Delmarva, which is a subsidiary of the blood bank of New York. So it's a private blood bank that's based out of the northern part of Delaware, and they provide all of the blood products to all the hospitals in the state. So in this case, we're sourcing our blood from the source, if you will, as opposed to other agencies that have been able to source their blood from a hospital. It's all just kind of how you're set up.
Right.
But in this case, we were the first agency in the larger blood bank of New York, which is a huge agency.
Huge corporation.
We were the first group to be able to successfully deploy pre-hospital blood with them. So that was a big, big deal.
What's the, I assume there's, for lack of a better phrase, an expiration date or an expiration time. What is the process if you have a blood unit but it's not going to be used? Is there a process to get it back to a facility to exchange that out so it can be pushed down the line and used?
Yeah, there is. And, I think, Dr. Cowan mentioned this, but the New York Blood Center and the Blood Bank of Delmarva, we could not have done this without them. So huge shout out. And if you're in an area that is part of one of those organizations, I promise you will be incredibly happy with their response to this program, because they're making it multiply in all of their catchment areas that they can. And we couldn't have done it without them. So that partnership was incredibly important, and we thank them to this day. So how do we get blood? We have a bit of a unique pathway here in Delaware. If we order blood, we get it directly from the blood bank. Now, in Sussex County, the blood bank that collects and distributes whole blood is right next to our level 1 trauma center. So I think this just goes to show how much the blood bank has worked with us and willing to work with us.
90 miles away.
90 miles away. So we order blood and they courier it down to us. They drop it off at our Sally Port. Typically, whole blood is good 21 days from the date of collection. So if you donate blood today, whole blood, it's got a shelf life of 21 days. It's just like Cinderella. It expires at midnight and it cannot be used. So when we initially started this program, we were carrying it through the 21 days. And then unfortunately, we did have to waste units that expired just because we didn't administer them. But where we have gotten to is a place where we get the blood bank to ship us blood. They courier it down to us. They bring it down to us in the cooler that actually stays in service. It's monitored the entire time. They have a rotation of our coolers. And they try, because they know we're going to have it potentially for a little while, to give us the most durable shelf life. So let's say blood was donated yesterday. We typically get it around day 19 or 20. We'll keep it on our truck. At 5 days from expiration, we let the blood bank know that we're going to rotate the blood back to them. They bring us a fresh unit of blood. We take the same cooler that the blood has been deployed on and bring it back to our Sally Port, and the blood bank comes and picks it up and takes it to our level 1 trauma center. And that level 1 trauma center processes that unit down. I like to say it's zero waste. It's not truly zero waste. It's as close as we can get, but they process it down to PRBCs, and then they use it in the trauma bays there. So it's as close to a zero waste process as we can get. Now, I will tell you that, remember, 90 nautical miles away, we're a far cry from the blood bank. We have had minimal operational downtime. So much so that if I am a supervisor and I administer blood here in Sussex County, let's account for the 40-minute trip to our level 1 trauma center with a helicopter. If I call the blood bank, they will actually deliver blood to the helicopter while we're sort of turning over at the level 1 trauma center. And then our paramedic flies back with blood. So it's really an incredible process that they have been able to sort of work with us through.
That's a great level of cooperation that's not often seen amongst that many agencies. It's just hard to get the logistics of that right.
There is a lot of logistics, a lot of bureaucratic stuff, a lot of SOP stuff, but we make it work. And to be quite honest with you, it was a busy summer weekend where we were giving a lot of blood, and I called the blood bank and said, "Hey, look, what do you guys think about just taking some blood over to the helicopter and getting it back in service?" And they were like, "Well, yeah, let's try it. Let's do it." And we had no policy for it. It was just a thing to do the right thing for the citizens in Delaware, which was really cool.
So to circle back to some comments that you all made earlier, that there were some hurdles to implementing this program. Can you talk about some of those hurdles and some things to consider before implementation if we have some clients that are wanting to go down that path?
Yeah, so I think the biggest hurdle is cost. Blood is expensive. We are we're paying about $550 per unit of whole blood. The consumable cost is there, depending on what and how you want to give the blood. There's cost associated with warmers. So you have to get the people that support your agency financially to buy in. The good news is, if you are a system that bills, I believe there's now some way to recapture some of the cost of whole blood through billing. In Sussex County, we don't bill at all. We're entirely tax-based. So to go to our council and to go to the representatives at the state and convince them that this is a good program was important for us, and there's no turning back now. I mean, we've certainly proved efficacy and that we are saving lives. I think step two is you have to establish a relationship with the blood bank, and you have to be willing to be transparent and cooperate and communicate and know that you're both approaching the same goal through a very different lens. What is important to the blood bank might not be important to the fire or EMS service, and vice versa, but the partnership is what gets this deal done. I think, medically, there were not a lot of hurdles for us, unless Dr. Cowan remembers differently. Everybody in the state of Delaware wanted to make this happen, from the Board of Medical Licensure and Discipline, and they were eager to make it happen. I think the other big thing is, you have to be transparent with your hospital partners. This is a new concept for them. Every hospital is different. Every hospital has different expectations of what they're going to do with the patients that receive whole blood. How do they respond to that? How does their blood bank respond to that? So I think all of this just boils down to sitting in a room and communicating and talking things through and recognizing that you may not be right the first time. The process needs to evolve. And that's certainly another thing that we have done here. I stood up in front of all 106 of our paramedics very early, and I said, we're on the cutting edge of this. Anticipate that this is going to change frequently, because there is no best practice right now. We are establishing best practice. So be comfortable with change, be comfortable with spending a lot of time training and retraining and answering questions of people. Because remember, paramedics don't deal with blood. This is a new concept. You don't really learn about this in paramedic school. You don't cover this like you cover every other drug in your drug box. And you just have to be able to communicate and be transparent. And quite honestly, sometimes I think EMS is all about instant gratification. I want to do this and I want to do this now. This is a game of patience. And you're in it for the marathon, not for the short-term sprint.
I think one of the things that I saw through the process was that we would hit these roadblocks that really seemed challenging to solve. Almost so that you were like, wow, can we make this thing ever happen? And what we would do is we would just stare at that roadblock and figure out a way around it. And then we would move forward, and then there would be another roadblock, and we would move forward, and roadblocks on our side, roadblocks on the hospital side or the blood bank side, and we just worked through it. The good news is, and so anybody who's going to try and establish this program, you should anticipate that. It's going to be a little frustrating as you meet the needs of everybody involved in this process. The good news is, because it's been done a lot, you probably can find a system that looks similar to yours to make it somewhat easier. But I think what made this program so successful is that we had Jordan as an individual stakeholder. And Jordan's boss said to him, probably in late 2020, make this happen and don't tell me why it can't happen. And he continued to tell him that through all of the obstacles, and just make it happen. And frankly, he was detailed out. A lot of his business day was to make this happen. So there was a period of time when he appeared to work full time on making this happen. That may be a little bit of exaggeration, but you're spending several hours every business day of the week to make it happen. And that's kind of what you need, is you need a champion. We also had a champion at the blood bank of Delmarva who was his contact, and they had this amazing relationship where they talked about the internal issues on both sides, and they sort of brainstormed how they were going to solve all these issues so we could meet all the needs of the stakeholders and make it happen.
So be prepared for a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. I'm guessing is kind of to summarize it.
Yeah, so a lot of work, a lot of collaboration, but remember, don't reinvent the wheel. Look to see how, like if you're dealing with a blood bank, or if you're dealing with a hospital and the hospital doesn't really know how to help you, but your plan is to get the blood from the hospital, we'll see what the regional blood bank is, who's giving them their blood, and have they done it, and if they can help, if they can be supportive. Because as I said a little while ago, this is becoming more ubiquitous in EMS around the country. So there's probably somebody who looks a lot like you that's done it somewhere else. Just keep looking. And everybody who's done this has been really excited to share their experience of how to do it and how to help. So much so that I love offering up Jordan's time. But if somebody listens to this and needs help, certainly Jordan Dottoli at Sussex County EMS, have at it. I love filling his day up with work.
He does.
Perfect. Well, let's get to some success stories and some positives from this program. Can you provide any clear success stories where the program has made a difference to the pre-hospital care and then the ultimate patient outcome?
Do you want to talk about the elderly guy who got the multiple units on the west side?
Yeah, so I think let me start here. I think that anybody who's listening to this is going to say, well, those sound like great anecdotal stories, but let's talk about the science. And, we were very fortunate that in Delaware, we just published in the Journal of Transfusion. And what we did was we looked at, ourselves. We were first in the state to give blood, and Newcastle County EMS in the northern part of the state was soon after followed. What we looked at were the first 100 patients that were transfused in the state, and there were some disqualifiers. So obviously these were adults only. These were trauma patients because that was initially what our pilot program was designed for. And you could not have been in cardiac arrest when we administered blood. So we excluded those patients. And what we found were 100 patients that we went and looked at. And the proof is in the pudding, for lack of a better term. 95% of those patients survived because they got blood. So 95 out of 100 patients survived in Delaware. Now, there's the science behind it. It's in the Journal of Transfusion. Our average time to give blood was under 30 minutes. So 30 minutes from the time 911 was activated to the bedside, somebody was getting blood. Now, there's the science. Let's transition into sort of the fun stories that everybody in EMS likes to talk about. I think, so we go live with this program, and it's 2 years of my life invested and worried and sleepless nights and constantly checking alarms, and it's busy. And we go live just before Memorial Day weekend, which is our transition into our summer season. It's when all the fun things happen in Sussex County. So we're about 3 or 4 or 5 days into it, and I'm rounding and answering questions and thinking, oh my gosh, when is this going to happen? So much so that on a Friday night, my wife says, hey, let's just put your phone down. Let's go out to dinner. Let's have a good evening. So I said, okay, no problem. I get in the shower. I come out of the shower and my phone is blowing up. I mean, everybody around the county is texting me. Here it is. It's the big one. It's going to happen. All these kinds of things. And it's true. It did happen. We were going to give blood. So this older female patient, she was in her 60s. She's in a motor vehicle collision. She's heavily trapped in the car. There's multiple patients. It takes about 30 or 45 minutes to extricate her from the vehicle. She is altered, but sort of hemodynamically stable while she's pinned in the car. Well, what happens? We extricate her out of the car. She immediately becomes unresponsive. Her vital signs tank. And we say, hey, here we go. Let's give blood. So we give blood. This was our first administration. We were still sort of teetering on the boundaries of, does this patient go to a level 1 trauma center 40 minutes away, or do they go to the local community hospital, which is about a 5-minute transport? So our crew made the right decision at the time. They started giving her blood, and they went locally to our community hospital. On the way to the hospital, this woman who could have been intubated starts getting blood products, and she wakes up. What's going on? What's happening? She has a not total correction, but a pretty good correction in her hemodynamic stability. She gets to the receiving facility. She gets multiple more units of blood. And obviously, she's transferred to a level 1 facility with significant multi-system trauma, orthopedic injuries, solid organ injuries. I mean, you name it, she had it. This is a lady that probably would have not done well otherwise. So the reason I tell you that story is because a year later, we celebrate our first anniversary of being live with whole blood. And who do you think our first donor was when we had a blood drive back into the blood program?
No, I can imagine it. I'm betting it was that lady.
It was that lady. That lady and her husband, both low titer O positive donors. She was very guarded about the presence of coming to that, but she was and her husband were the first to donate back into the program. I'm telling you, I've been doing this since 2002. This lady would have died otherwise. You know, we have many, many more stories like this. We have stories of a 97 or 98, a really elderly gentleman driving in a car. He's trapped. He's hit by a large SUV. He's multiple crews are working to extricate him. He hemodynamically looks okay, but then all of a sudden doesn't look great. He gets blood. He gets flown to our level 1 trauma center with the most amazing injuries you can imagine. I mean, what I would say is a death sentence for a 20-year-old, yet alone somebody in his upper 90s. I called to the trauma center that evening just to check on him, and the nurse put me on hold, and the physician, the trauma surgeon, picked up the phone and said, "What did you do for this guy? How is he alive?" This guy had such significant orthopedic injuries, yet multi-system trauma, that they actually didn't plan to fix any of his orthopedic injuries. And he was discharged home after a short stint in rehab. I mean, this guy would have clearly been dead. We have cases where, you know, we're proud here to do rapid sequence intubation, and we'll intubate you and, you know, send you wherever you need to go. Well, guess what happened? We stopped intubating trauma patients because we re-triaged blood forward, and the people that were getting blood were waking up. They were becoming reanimated. Their vital signs were improving. You know, their shock indexes would go from north of 2 to normal. And it's just pretty remarkable. I think we're probably around 250 units in the state, maybe a little more than that. Proudly, we are the first state in the country, and I believe still the only state in the country where anybody who contacts 911 has access to whole blood. Every one of our state paramedic service, everybody carries whole blood in Delaware.
Well, I wanted to follow up with that. How did this program, you mentioned everyone carries it, so how did this program develop into a statewide initiative? Did you all have a role in that process, or was it just a normal evolution of healthcare in the state?
No, we definitely had a role in it. So all of our protocols are approved by the Delaware Board of Medical Licensure and Discipline. The way paramedics exist in Delaware is as physician extenders. That's as a matter of law. So all of the protocols go through them. So we essentially had the pilot program for whole blood, and we were in that pilot program for 18 months or so. I think the goal was always, when we were done, if we were successful, that it would roll out to the entire state. Now, the reality is it's entire state, but remember, we're really small. We have 3 ground EMS agencies, and then the state police do aeromedical work for us. So the initial pilot was with Sussex County EMS and Newcastle County EMS. So it wasn't a heavy lift to bring along the 3rd county and the state police. But the short answer is, initially, as we did this, as we do all of our initial programs as an official pilot, and then evaluate it, and then can demonstrate the efficacy, and then move from a pilot into a regular protocol.
Well, gentlemen, that was a lot of great information that I think we packed into about a 40-minute podcast. I think we could probably talk for another hour about this, but this is where we need to cut it short for today. So I really want to thank you for joining me today, and thank you for all your great information. So, Jordan, Dr. Cowan, thank you. Thanks again for being on the program.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks for having us.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guests Jordan Datoli and Dr. Paul Cowan once again for their time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees. Additionally, all views, information, or opinions expressed are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, medical, or other professional advice on any subject matter.